Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you all. Well, welcome to our webinar, 5 Reasons Why MSPs Need a Cybersecurity Partner. A couple of housekeeping notes before we jump right in. You'll see on the bottom of your screen, it's usually on the bottom of your screen, see a Q&A option. Please feel free to add any questions or comments there, and we'll make sure to address them. Also, you might see we'll be recording this webinar, and we will absolutely make it available for you to share or review afterwards yourself if there's anything you want to go back to. Now, with that, I would really love to introduce Reg Harnish, our speaker for today. Maybe so we can get our graphics and all. So Reg is a highly regarded thought leader in the industry. For those that aren't familiar with him, and the CEO of OrbitalFire, the leading cybersecurity services provider focused on small businesses and the ultimate cybersecurity partner for MSPs. So prior to OrbitalFire, Reg was the founder and former CEO of GreyCastle Security, a former executive vice president at the Center for Internet Security, and the former CTO of Autotask. With that, Reg, why don't I hand it over to you to get started?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time today for what we, of course, consider a core mission here at OrbitalFire, which is sort of looking at managed services and particularly how cybersecurity has affected managed services and MSPs, and really trying to come up with a better solution. Certainly, we have experienced this over probably 2 decades now. When we think about managed services, as a founder and CTO at Autotask, going back to, well, now, 23 years, we were sort of there day one when managed services was being invented, and it solved a lot of problems. But what we've seen over the last 23 years or so is a bit of fracturing and fissuring of the model, primarily because the industry has developed into a situation where MSPs have become responsible for everything. And it's created some issues. And, when we think about MSSPs or other technology vendors, that situation and that model has limits, and it's created or been exposed, I think, by cybersecurity in a way that we really hadn't seen before. So we want to talk a little bit about that today. So probably makes sense to start out with, what is the condition here of MSPs as it relates to cybersecurity, because certainly we know that the industry is begging you, teasing you, attracting you to cybersecurity in all sorts of different ways. There are thousands of tools out there, constant media, publicity, promotion around cybersecurity. And then also, the people that we serve, small businesses, they are constantly in headlines, inundated with media and hype and hysteria. And so the whole thing is kind of like being in a MSP cybersecurity snow globe. And there's a lot of things moving around, but it's produced some interesting results that I want to share with you today, and probably things that you've already seen. So it's no secret, right, that most MSPs operate at sort of a break-even financial position, financial status. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that many MSPs are small, and I say small, 5 to 10 employees, and that the P&L and the balance sheet aren't necessarily their focus, right? They're focused on serving customers, learning, dealing, supporting, managing, delivering technology services. But part of this issue is really the root cause of part of this issue is this idea that MSPs need to do everything. And thousands of vendors want to sell you their gadgets. And they believe that MSPs like tools, and that's the core of your business, the things that you do. What's happened is we've seen limits on this, and MSPs getting to the point where they're not sure how the rest of the business is operating because they're so focused on tools and technology and service delivery that they aren't reading a P&L, and they don't understand how different business lines are making money or not making money. And so it's resulted in this sort of financial, I would call it a crisis. I mean, more than half of MSPs are operating at the break even or lower sort of survivability level, which means you may not even be making money, but you're doing something that keeps the business running or in some ways viable. And a lot of this is a business model issue, right? So if you work for an MSP where you're just not sure, or you've already confirmed that, you know, financial issues are part of your sort of daily operation, then it's probably warrants some inspection, thinking about your model. Where are you making money? How are you generating revenue? Where do you see margin in profit? And how much of this is going into expense, right? So things like cybersecurity talent or licensing for tools, or could be anything. Another really important statistic is that most MSPs that we talk to tell us that they're overwhelmed, that they've already got 10, 15, maybe more tools in their stack, and they are constantly inundated by the industry to attempt to take on more tools. Now, not to say that there's not great technology out there, because some of the technology is just downright amazing, but as a business, you know, things, you know, part of focusing on your core is really sort of business 101. And if you're already overwhelmed, this introduction to cybersecurity which is yet another 1,000 potential vendors and tools, can feel overwhelming, right? And so we've seen lots of, you know, Reddit posts and blogs and things like that where MSPs are experiencing burnout because the industry continues to thrive on selling stuff to MSPs, that now the MSP needs to figure out, well, how do I pay for that? Because I've got to pay licensing. How do I sell it? How do I generate revenue, make money, support it? And these are things that are very costly in terms of time, money, and energy. And that's because the solution has always been more tools, get another tool. And that has caused really some of these cracks to appear in the model. Now, I think because of this, and that distraction or the focus on tools or the way the industry positions cybersecurity to MSPs, the reality is that our customers are not feeling the value. They're not seeing the benefits. They're not, we're not seeing an improvement in their risk or the level of cybercrime or disruptions or losses to wire fraud. We're not seeing that. So the system, if we measure it from its outcomes, which is ideally, that's how you should measure any system, the system's not working. So what we can complain about the number of tools or the model or profitability, but the proof really is that the people that we serve are not seeing the outcomes, the expected outcomes. And working backwards from that's a problem, because it creates yet another issue, which is this, which was striking to me. So this is the most recent ConnectWise State of the SMB Cybersecurity Report, which suggested that of the thousands of small businesses that they polled, almost every single one would leave their current MSP if they could find a better option. And a lot of that has to do with communications, and, you know, certainly it's a difficult job to do in the first place, right? Doing technology well is not easy. But part of it is that there's miscommunication or a misunderstanding, both at the MSP level, but as well as the small business, about what is cybersecurity and how is it different from technology, and what's the sort of jurisdiction, what swim lanes should my partners and providers be living in? How does this all work? And because we've not done a great job as an industry communicating, educating, and then delivering on promises or better outcomes for customers, they're constantly looking for a different solution. They're not happy where they are. As a very, you know, it's a very common situation where, you know, businesses are asking us, you know, do you know a good MSP? Because the one I have is not working out. So common. We know that there's a lot of volatility in the industry, and customer retention is a real challenge. So now all of these things have kind of led to what I call sort of a cyber breaking point. And if we look again back at what is now sort of an antique managed services, 23 years, at least 23, 25 years old, it's becoming an antique, and we really haven't done anything to address these issues that are causing these metrics and these issues and problems in the industry. And I would say at best, what we've done is tried to automate or compound this idea that MSPs can do everything for their customers. No different than if MSPs were being asked to do payroll, or to do insurance, or to do facilities construction. Are they relevant to small businesses? Absolutely. Does it make sense for MSPs to take these things on directly? Maybe not. It really depends on your situation and your customers. But we believe that there's a better way. And a whole bunch of reasons why MSPs should take a hard look at their stack, their services, and how they're delivering those. Because we believe that partnering with a cybersecurity provider is the future. And most of the metrics that we see support this theory that, first of all, cybersecurity and technology, very, very different. These are incredibly different things. There is overlap, no doubt. But at its core, managing risk has very little to do with technology. In fact, if you look at the risk management models that are popular globally, they don't care if it's a firewall or a hamster wheel, as long as it addresses that risk and that control exists. So cybersecurity and technology, very, very different. The approaches to managing these things, very different. Technology is binary. Cybersecurity is very much subjective and qualitative, in the sense that if you need storage, you buy storage and you have storage. If you need another Microsoft license, you buy a license and you have another license. It's very binary, one-to-one correlation between your investment and your outcome in technology. Whereas in cybersecurity, there are lots of companies spending money on cyber and not managing their risk or reducing their risk. And there are lots of small businesses out there who have done nothing in cybersecurity and still haven't had a problem. And so the correlation, or there is no correlation really between your investment in cybersecurity and the outcome. Managing risk is much more qualitative and subjective. It's not binary in any way. So thinking about these as different problems with different solutions, then you start to have to back up and say, well, then maybe the current model of pushing everything through an MSP doesn't make sense either. I want to talk about 5 reasons why we think it doesn't make sense to do that. And then I'm going to talk about some solutions as well. So the first is this. Really, IT is kind of one of the last industries where there is very little governance or oversight, meaning anyone can stand up an MSP, start an MSP, and start delivering services to small businesses. And different than contractors who have building inspectors, accountants who have auditors, and law enforcement that has public or internal affairs. Every other industry on the planet has oversight and governance through this thing we call segregation of duties, which is not only a best practice in cybersecurity, it's actually required by most regulatory mandates, including DFAR, CMMC, HIPAA, and the list goes on. Today, MSPs are being encouraged to assess and test and measure and monitor their own work. That system is broken. And for 2 reasons, really. One is that we don't get the integrity that we expect out of the system because we don't have the oversight that's required. So you may have deployed a firewall or multi-factor or encryption, but you're also the one that is being asked to assess it or test it. That is a what I'll call a fraudulent system. That doesn't work. And the segregation of duties is designed to minimize that kind of lack of oversight. The second thing is that the MSP may not want to, right? Most of the MSPs that we meet, they want to do technology. They don't really want to be dragged into cybersecurity. but yet they are. And whether that's from the industry pushing tools on them, or it's their customer asking them to do things in cybersecurity because the customer just lacks a general understanding of the differences between cyber and technology. But right now, segregation of duties is virtually absent in the industry. What that has caused now is emerging regulation on MSPs such that they will be disallowed to do certain things. I think it's somewhere between 12 and 15 states have bills in legislatures that say MSPs can no longer be the assessor for their own work, or they're limited in terms of the scope of their engagement with these customers. So we see that's already starting because as an industry, we haven't done a great job self-regulating. So that's segregation of duties is absolutely critical for success and better outcomes for customers. Another one, and again, we've all seen the headlines. How many MSPs do you know that have either been blamed or worse, maybe sued, canceled, terminated because customer engages with an IT provider. The IT provider tells the customer that they are a cybersecurity firm or that they're doing cybersecurity for them, and they may be, by the way. But the customer doesn't necessarily understand the difference between what the MSP has agreed to do and what their expectations are. And perhaps the MSP has just not done a great job communicating the difference. Maybe they're not sure what the difference between cyber and IT really is. And so what happens is the customer experiences an incident, and of course, they're going to blame cybersecurity. Well, because the MSP has introduced themselves as a cybersecurity company, and the customer already assumed that they were a cybersecurity company, they get the blame. Now, secondarily, incident response is 10% technology, but there's a whole bunch of other things that go into it. So ask yourself, if you were responding to an incident for your customer because you are positioned there as the cybersecurity provider, do you know your FBI agents? Have you ever edited or reviewed crisis communications or press releases, notifications? Are you familiar with the regulatory oversight and requirements for reporting? And the list goes on and on. Again, technology is a very important part of incident response, but it's not the only part. And the rest of it tends to get out of the wheelhouse of MSPs very, very quickly. So it ends up producing a suboptimal outcome for the customer. And the customer really has no other recourse than to blame the MSP and then pursue some, whether it's legal action or looking for a new MSP. There's a better way, but today you are the scapegoat for incidents because you haven't communicated the difference to the customer or educated the customer, and the customer isn't getting educated anywhere else. One is, we talked a little bit about profitability. Cybersecurity is a complex animal, right? No different than technology, where there's a lot of moving parts, and it requires talent and licensing and certifications and training and a whole bunch of other things. And so because cybersecurity has been treated the same way that technology has been handled for the last 20 years, it's created some confusion and messiness in your P&L. And you may not even know, or you may not even be able to distinguish between technology and cybersecurity services at your company. But one of the issues here is not only that complexity, but also focus, right? So Confucius says, if he who chases two rabbits catches none. Business 101 would suggest to you that you consider focusing on your core competencies, whether those are Windows or the cloud or it could be anything. But cybersecurity is a very different animal. To become a cybersecurity expert, in addition to an IT expert, requires a lot of time, money, and energy. And so focus is not only creating poorer outcomes for customers and hurting retention, but it's also has impact on your P&L. Again, keep in mind that this industry, when you engage in cybersecurity, the only person or only company that makes money is your vendors. That's not you. It's not until you sell it deploy, implement, support, and embed that in a contract that an MSP makes money on cybersecurity. So there's a lot of ground in between finding that tool and paying that vendor, licensing that tool, to making money in cybersecurity. There's a lot of space and a lot of things have to go really well for you to do that. So we have no doubt that cybersecurity is contributing to the financial status of this 60% of MSPs who are really at break even or worse. I'm going to say it and put it right out there. MSPs are the weakest link for a number of reasons. The weakest security link. One is that you are connected to 20, 50 other organizations. No one else operates that way. So you have a unique risk and vulnerability in the sense that you are what we call a force multiplier. And what that means is if you were to experience compromise, and these stories are already out there, right? So if an MSP is compromised, it tends to lead to compromise of their customers. That's very different than a bank or a hospital or an online retailer they're not connected to other organizations. So you're not just the weakest link for cybersecurity purposes, but also because of the nature of your business and the connectedness of this and this idea of being force multiplier. You're also the weakest link because of your status in that situation. So it's not just the connectedness, it's that you have elevated privileges on each one of those connections. So again, unlike any other business on the planet, MSPs are in a situation where to do business, they have to be connected and they need elevated or admin level privileges and entitlements. That creates an inherent vulnerability. And so this whole thing starts to add up. The third is that you're generally in a hurry. We don't see too many MSPs where people are sitting around with their feet up, right? They're generally overwhelmed, whether it's dealing with vendors or it's dealing with customer issues or trying to find new talent, or it could be anything. So this combination of connectedness, elevated privileges, and a constant state of urgency creates massive vulnerability. And while I'm not going to pick on any MSPs, we've all seen the headlines. Certainly they've happened to folks that we know of, where they were compromised and then ultimately their customers suffered because of that. This all comes down to a concept called aggregate risk. When MSPs are looking to secure their own environment, and that could be through just-in-time admin accounts or encryption or whatever, they are only considering their own business. But that's not really the cybersecurity program that's appropriate for an MSP. An MSP should be considering their aggregate risk, which is every one of their customers, every one of their connections, and every one of their managed endpoints. So many MSPs secure themselves as if they are a 5-person company, despite the fact that they have access to 500 endpoints for 20 different customers. And so the program is inadequate, it's inappropriate, and it's really not working. A lot of it has to do with cybersecurity, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that to do business, some of these things are just required of you as a provider. And another reason for considering a partner is dealing with this customer retention issue, which today is a bit of a plague, right? We know that there's massive volatility and turnover with SMBs and MSPs as well. But the reality is that happier customers, satisfied customers stay longer. And predictable, consistent, high quality outcomes produce happier, more satisfied customers. And experts who have experience in certain areas tend to produce higher quality outcomes. So it's a simple chain of events here. If you want to maximize your customer retention, you probably are going to need to deal with, in addition to some other things, your core competencies. What's the quality of your service? What's your ability to respond? Can the customer trust you to do the work that you have promised? Some of this comes from miscommunication. Some of it comes from a lack of education on the customer's part. But customers are not generally leaving MSPs because they're bad people or aren't working hard. Like that's almost never the case. They leave MSPs because they don't trust them, or they don't see the value, or they feel like there's a better option. Solving these 5 issues will lead to better customer retention, which, in my opinion, starts to solve these financial issues as well. By focusing, you produce better outcomes, you experience higher retention, and that leads to greater profitability. So to recap, I mean, there are a couple of these, and I think the industry has been beating on these metrics and these issues. We start to see them over and over, whether it's a Datto, ConnectWise, Kaseya, could be any of the industry reports. They all kind of lead to the same thing, which is we can't keep customers long enough. We can't make money. We can't afford more tools, or, you know, whether it's the time or the money. And so again, when we talk about the managed services model fracturing, it's fracturing because there's too much water pushing on the dam right now. There's too much pressure on MSPs to take on more and more things, more services, and cybersecurity is a big part of that. So our philosophy is a reintroduction or a refactoring or rethinking about how MSPs handle cybersecurity. And the term MSSP is out there, but we think that is sort of part of the problem right now. But if we just tweak this a little bit, we think that there's an overwhelmingly positive and constructive solution. We call it MSSP 2.0, but we don't refer to it as managed security services provider. We refer to it as managed security services partner. Let me explain a little bit about what that looks like. Imagine for a second that instead of paying your vendor, that they paid you, whether it's referral commissions or they were driving technology, labor, hardware, software sales, creating more work for you at these customers that you never would have discovered because of maybe lack of visibility to the 2/3 of cybersecurity that has nothing to do with technology, things like compliance, maybe incident response, policy, governance, process. What if you had a vendor that actually paid you to get into cybersecurity rather than you having to license tools, hire people, pay for certifications, figure out how to sell, pay for marketing, attend cybersecurity conferences? What if you didn't have any of those expenses and instead the vendor actually paid you? There is a model where that exists. What if you no longer were facing pressure to license yet another tool, in whether it's cybersecurity or otherwise? What if a partner was responsible for those tools? And as part of that, they were paying you for the pleasure of working with you. So eliminating a lot of these cybersecurity expenses and overhead that exist, and whether you understand them and have quantified them in your P&L, your balance sheet, or anywhere, what if those expenses just overnight kind of went away? What if that same partner or vendor eliminated your liability during incidents? What if that vendor became the first call that the customer made, and the team or the provider that was managing the entire incident response process in dealing with law enforcement and regulatory oversight and notification and reporting and crisis communications, and let you focus on the technology, and whether that's re-imaging machines, restoring from a immutable backup, the things that you're really good at. And meanwhile, all at the same time, instead of being the scapegoat during incidents, you're now a hero. You get to parachute in and fix things, not address, figuring out who your local FBI agent is. That is a huge shift. And considering a partner makes this possible. What if that partner also reduced your aggregate risk in the sense that they were actually helping you secure those endpoints, those customers, providing more visibility, more oversights, monitoring, measuring, assessing, testing, monitoring that same digital estate that you have built? having a second set of eyes and experts who are constantly looking at all of those things and helping you become more secure, both at the customer level as well as internally at your own MSP, reducing your aggregate risk, maybe making it actually possible for you to get a cyber insurance policy again, and reducing that aggregate risk so that you are no longer a force multiplier in the way that you are today. You are no longer the weakest link. You are a technology provider that is, working in a more secure environment. What if that partner also refused contractually to compete with you, right? It's the same, a lot of the same vendors who are pushing you to buy their tools are also perfectly happy going directly to your customers. And you know who they are. I'm not going to demonize any one of them, but we know that that's happening and creating, consternation in the industry, because it's actually cheaper for that provider, that vendor, to go directly to the customer. There's more money in it for them, of course, and they want that relationship directly with the customer as well. Meanwhile, cutting you out of the loop on a tool that you're already paid for. What if you could work with someone who just refused to compete with you? And ultimately, solving this customer retention and profitability issue, what if you had a partner who was in this to make you look good and to solve cybersecurity issues in a way that all three parties benefited: the customer, the MSP, and the partner? This is how we see in the way we define managed security services partner. These are the things that they focus on. These are the benefits to an MSP, and this model exists today. So a couple of other things before we take questions, if there are any. This is happening. So this idea of a managed security services partner, it's happening. It's in the industry. There are already providers out there that operate like this. We happen to be one of them. And so customers, small businesses, are now gradually, slowly, but gradually getting educated. And they are less and less asking their MSP or IT provider to help them with cybersecurity. They're going out and finding a partner that can help, someone that specializes in compliance, or specializes in incident response or governance, or all of these things in cybersecurity that have little or nothing to do with technology. Customers are figuring this out slowly. And so we're encouraging MSPs to find a cybersecurity partner before their customer does it for them, because this is sort of the wave. I would say about 50% of our business comes direct to us from small businesses. The other 50%, of course, comes through MSPs. But more and more, we see customers engaging us directly because they've figured out that cybersecurity and IT are very different, and they want experts in different areas, just like they want a different expert for payroll or insurance or benefits or really anything. So this is important, I think, for smart MSPs. They're going to make the move quickly, just like going back 23 years. It was the smart MSPs who made the jump from break fix to managed services quickly. They kind of bit the bullet and said, yes, it's going to be a different business model. Yes, we're going to have to think about things differently. There might be some pain, in this process, but ultimately, this is the way forward. And if we're going to be successful and viable going forward, we're going to need to make this shift. And then the last point I want to make is that we talk to countless MSPs. We know that it can be a little bit scary. There's my Zoom video driver issue. Enjoy the blue. So we talk to streams of MSPs about what we're doing, about partnering with a cybersecurity provider, about MSSP 2.0 and all the benefits. And 99% of them tell us, oh my God, this is awesome. I cannot believe you're solving all these problems for me. We can't wait to engage. However, 80% of them don't make the first step. They can't get to the point where they can actually get on the treadmill. So losing weight, committed to it. Healthier, longer life, committed to it, but it's going to take the first step. So It may be scary, and there may be some questions that you have, but I'd encourage you to think about this. No doubt, just like we saw managed services as the next wave, no doubt, MSSP 2.0 is definitely the next wave in cybersecurity and IT, and encourage you to do your homework, see if it's a good fit for you. It may not be, but for many MSPs, it truly is, and it solves a lot of problems. So that's my story, sticking to it. I'm going to stop my video here quickly. See if this works. Okay. So Dana, I'll hand it back to you to see if there are any questions that have come in.
That's great. Thanks so much, Reg. So we definitely, if you see at the bottom, there's that Q&A button on your screen. We really encourage you to use that. We have no questions yet, Reg. And, please, we'd love to start a conversation and continue that with any questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would love to hear, I was kind of around, in the early days of Autotask, I was around the time when managed services was born, and we were all as an industry trying to define what this thing was, and we were figuring out what problems we were solving, but it wasn't perfect. Managed services was not perfect 20 years ago because we couldn't possibly know everything and understand all of the issues and solve all of the problems. And so would also encourage you, if you are an MSP or an IT provider that is seeing this happening, ask questions, talk to someone like us and say, hey, listen, I'm curious about how this works. Can you tell me, can you answer this question? Or maybe you're a little bit different, or your customers are slightly different. I would say, get your questions answered, ask hard questions and figure out if it's a fit for you. The reality is that some of these key metrics are not going to change in the industry, whether it's retention, profitability, or anything else, until something changes. That we know. We can't continue to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. So even if there are no questions today, which we know that, we're putting you on the spot a little bit here, please reach out to us at partners@orbitalfire.com. If we can answer any questions, we're happy to go into a deeper dive on how our partner program works. This is not a sales pitch. Whether it's us or someone else that you may find that is operating this way, I would encourage you to explore. If these are your concerns, there could be a solution out there for you. So thank you for your time today. Please connect with us if there are any questions. And Dana, back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Reg. And again, just to echo what Reg said, please reach out to us at any time at partners@orbitalfire.com. We are always there for you. And this is recorded, so we are going to share this out afterwards. So you could go through it again. And if any other questions come up, then please reach out to us. Thanks so much for your time, Reg. Thank you. And
thank you,
we
everyone.
look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Take care.